I want to talk with you about blood sugar regulation and why this is so important if your child is struggling with things like focus and attention problems, anxiety, mood issues, behavior challenges. Most of the time, when we think about blood sugar or blood sugar dysregulation, we're thinking about that in the physical sense, right? Maybe people who are pre-diabetic or diabetic, those tend to be the realms that we think about that. But I want to talk about it in terms of brain function and mental health, particularly for our kids. So ideally, what we want to be doing throughout the day is eating in a way where we keep our blood sugar levels stable. That means that we're taking in food and our body is digesting them and working through, burning through the sugars and the proteins and the fats and all of the things in our food pretty steadily. And then we eat again a while later and it keeps our blood sugar pretty steady. What we want to avoid are these blood sugar spikes and crashes, which happen when we take in food that quickly gets turned into sugar or is sugar when it goes in, and the body burns through that really quick. And we get this spike of lots of blood sugar, and then this crash where it's like, the body burned through that super quick and it's gone. So an example would be like, let's take the difference between maybe a piece of white bread and a piece of whole grain bread, just as a simple example. The whole grain bread has more fiber in it. It's got whole grains in it that the body burns through more slowly. So it keeps our blood sugar more stable. Yes, our blood sugar rises when we eat it, but it doesn't do the spike and then the crash that happens when we eat the piece of white bread, which really has just a lot of simple carbs in it. And when we take that in, our blood sugar goes way up quickly and it burns through that sugar quickly, and then it crashes on the other side. So that's just a simple example of how the body can use different types of carbohydrates and different types of foods that we eat in different ways. So our goal is to keep our blood sugar as stable as we can throughout the day. And what that does is it not only supports us physically and how our body's functioning, it also supports brain function because it is allowing the brain to have steady energy levels, steady ability to regulate mood and focus and all of those things. Now, let's look at what happens for a lot of kids. They are eating in ways that they're taking in a lot of foods with added sugars, with simple carbohydrates, not a lot of protein. And what's happening is they take that in, and the body and the brain burn through that quickly. So we get this spike and then we get this crash on the other side. And what that can look like is a kiddo who shortly after eating has a lot of energy, is kind of bouncing off the walls, or maybe seems like they're in a good mood, is kind of a little bit manicky and really elevated in their mood, but then crashes on the other side and feels really fatigued, may get really irritable, really moody, have more sort of behavioral just falling apart or resistiveness, difficulty focusing. So we see these peaks and valleys in terms of how their body is using what they're eating, and then that corresponds to their brain function and their behavior. And if we think about how a lot of kids are eating throughout the day, they may be for breakfast, let's say they have a sugary cereal, or even a cereal that has a lot of refined grains in it, maybe things like Pop-Tarts or a muffin, even a lot of the kid-friendly like breakfast bars or shakes or things, pretty high sugar in them. And so they get that boost or that burst of energy right away, but then they burn through that quickly and crash on the other side. And then maybe they have a snack. Let's say they have a bag of like processed fruit snacks. Again, high boost of sugar going into the system quickly, but the body and the brain burn through it, and then there's a crash on the other side. So many kids that I see in the clinic, and many kids out there in general, are sort of on what I call this blood sugar roller coaster all day long because of the way that they're eating. And that has a tremendous impact on learning, on development, on brain function, on behavior. And there are studies that show this again and again in all different ways with kids, how food intake, particularly when it comes to sugar levels and blood sugar stabilization, are related to everything from symptoms of ADHD to anxiety and panic disorder to disruptive behavior, all of those kinds of things. So we want to really be thinking about this and to recognize that it isn't just about candy at the school Halloween party or something obvious like that, a kid having a soda pop. Those obviously have a lot of sugar in them and will lead to those spikes and those crashes, but a lot of things that kids are eating on a regular basis can lead to this. And so it's important to consider that, especially if you have a child who has neurodevelopmental kinds of issues, who has mental health challenges, or who just struggles with emotional and behavioral regulation. This piece about how the food that they're eating and the things that they're drinking and how that connects to their blood sugar regulation and stabilizing or not stabilizing those levels throughout the day, it's a really important thing to understand. Now, does this mean that if you feed your child in a way that keeps their blood sugar levels nice and stable, that they won't have any of these symptoms or struggles? No, it does not mean that. There are certainly lots of kids who are eating a well-balanced, nutrient-dense, fiber-rich, blood sugar stabilizing diet who still struggle with symptoms related to learning, attention, behavior, those kinds of things. However, eating in a way that stabilizes blood sugar lays a really important foundation for improving all of these things in kids. So while feeding a child a diet that helps to stabilize their blood sugar may not make all of their problems and symptoms go away, it goes a long way to helping them in those areas and making them better able to be to utilize the strategies and all of the things that we're doing with them, the other therapies that we're doing, the strategies that we're trying to teach them. So it is a really important foundation. So what does it look like to be feeding kids in ways that help keep their blood sugar levels nice and stable? Well, first of all, it means focusing on more nutrient-dense foods. In general, we might think of these as whole foods, not processed kinds of foods. So like actual produce, fruits and vegetables, meats, nuts, seeds, things like that. But there are processed foods that are definitely more nutrient dense. And this comes down to really reading packages to see how much added sugar it is in things, or artificial sweeteners, how many chemicals, to look at our products whole grain versus refined grains, how much protein and healthy fat are we balancing in a food product or in a meal or a snack for a child. Big difference between eating, let's say, a piece of toast with butter or jelly on it versus eating a piece of toast that has nut butter on it, or nut butter and, banana or avocado toast. Again, we're looking at how can we balance these carbs and carbs that absolutely do break down into sugar in the body with protein and healthy fat. That's key. What's the balance of that look like? So we need to be thinking about that balance. We need to be reading labels and trying to avoid lots of added sugars is another piece of things in the processed foods that we are feeding to our kids. So more nutrient dense foods, more whole foods, pulling back on the processed foods, especially the ones that have added sugars in them, that have lots of chemicals and other kinds of ingredients that can cause blood sugar dysregulation. Also, a really basic thing is making sure that kids are drinking water as their primary beverage. Fruit juices, lots of sport drinks, soda pops, all of those kinds of things add a whole lot of sugar into the diet. Even fruit smoothies, things that are sort of marketed as healthy, may really add a lot of sugar in there that causes those spikes and those crashes. So drinking water as a primary beverage, and really just looking at overall over the course of the day, how much added sugar is in the food that kids are eating, how much fiber are they getting, do they have a good balance of things? And then the other piece is eating consistently. So some kids, especially as they get more towards the teen years, may skip meals or eat in really haphazard ways. And on the one hand, we want to honor when a kid actually is hungry versus not hungry, but on the other hand, kids need a lot of fuel in their food for growth, both physically and brain-wise. And when they are skipping meals or going long stretches of time without eating, that's going to lead to blood sugar dysregulation too. And we all know, right, when kids maybe get in the car, they get home at the end of the day, if they haven't had a snack yet, they are hangry, right? They are moody, they are irritable, they're falling apart more, and then they have a good healthy snack, and it kind of boosts them and their mood improves. So we do want to be thinking about the consistency of eating and making sure that things are available to kids throughout the day. This can be a big issue, I know, during the school day, and I'm a big proponent of kids having access to nutrient-dense, healthy snacks, water, those kinds of things throughout the day at school, not going these long stretches of time where they're not eating. That's not helpful for blood sugar stabilization and helping their brain and their body to function well. So those are some of the things that you want to think about with that. Keeping in mind, as with everything with our kids, and especially anytime we're talking about food and nutrition, we're working on progress, not perfection. So I'm not suggesting that you need to completely overhaul instantly everything about your child's diet if you realize that they are on this blood sugar roller coaster and that that's not helping them. Take some simple steps. If you feel like, wow, I've got some of this going well, where are some areas that you can improve? Just look at taking one step at a time, that progress, not perfection, moving towards more nutrient-dense foods, moving towards drinking a lot more water, eating more consistently, making healthy, well-balanced snacks available. All of these little steps make a big difference. So look at what you can do, even with a really picky eater, and I know some of you have picky eaters, looking at swapping some of their favorites for some more nutrient-dense options, looking at how you can balance the proteins that they do eat with the carbs that they eat, looking at the little steps that you can do, because we can all do some things to support kids in this area to help keep their blood sugar levels more stable throughout the day, which will help their brain to function better. It will help their mood, their behavior, their learning, all of those things. So I'd love to hear what you think about this. Did you have any aha moments? What have you noticed in relation to what you're feeding your kids, blood sugar levels, their behavior, their mood, all of that? Share with me in the comments so we can continue the discussion there. And that'll also help me to know if you have specific questions, go ahead and ask them and I'll answer those in upcoming videos.